What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatolito Boxing Show. And Saturday is going to be a pretty cool card. It seems like it was having some issues at the gate, low gate attendance, low numbers in sales as far as the reports have been coming off. And there was even some stress there that the show was going to be canceled. Of course, I'm speaking about Joyce, the Juggernaut, against Joseph Parker. Now, this fight is supposed to be taking place at the Manchester Arena in England, and there's big implications here for this heavyweight match. It's pretty interesting, and it sucks that it didn't have that much attention behind it. Not sure if it was a promotional thing or maybe people are just not interested, but every article that I read, everywhere that I'm looking into this fight, including myself as a boxing fan, I'm pretty intrigued by this matchup. Joyce and Joseph Parker have been long-standing heavyweights, at least for the last couple years, last 2-3 years. They've been doing their thing at heavyweight. Joyce, of course, coming into this undefeated, fresh off his victory against Christian Hammer, and that was a 4-round stoppage. In that fight, Joyce, in his recent fight against Christian Hammer, he ended up taking some damage. He got hit with some heavy leather from Hammer, heavy punches where his guard was down, and he took him right square in the nose, and he didn't get wobbled. That's the one thing about Joyce, that he just continues coming at you. He's got a granite chin with good power behind his punches. He's a little bit slower in his delivery, but he's got a lot of power behind those punches. And the fact that he keeps coming at you, it's swarming, it's smothering for his opponents. At least it's proven to be so in his most notorious fight to date. Aside from this one against Joseph Parker, I think this is probably the highest level fighter out of his entire resume. But his most notorious victory to me was when he ended up beating Daniel Dubois, damaged his eye fairly bad to where Daniel Dubois ended up taking a knee in the 10th and wasn't able to finish the fight and able to continue. From there, Joyce went on to beat Carlos Takam, stopped him in 6 rounds, and then Christian Hammer stopped him in 4 rounds. Very impressive record, near flawless record as far as knockout percentage. He's got 13 knockouts out of his 14 victories, 14-0 to date. And everybody except Bryant Jennings has been stopped. Bryant Jennings is the only unanimous decision. That was a 12-round fight dating back to 2019. Bryant Jennings outlasted and at least saw the fight through to the end against Joyce. Everybody else has been stopped in one way or another. Very impressive names on his resume thus far. If we look at his recent opponents, Christian Hammer, of course, we mentioned that fight took place this past July. From there, Carlos Takam, Daniel Dubois, Michael Wallish, Bryant Jennings, Oleksandr Usyk, Bermane Stiverne. Those are the opponents of note that have some type of notoriety behind them, at least names that I recognize, and I'm sure you do as well. So pretty impressive record that the Juggernaut has put together. 14-0, 13 knockouts going in to this fight with WBO title implications against none other than New Zealand's own Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker's walking into this with a 30-2 record. 21 of those 30 victories have come by way of stoppage. He's been able to stop 21 of his 30 opponents, of his 32 opponents, by way of the fast lane. He's, of course, coming off. He's on a bit of a win streak, six fight win streak right now since his back-to-back defeats that he suffered when he kicked off his 2018 campaign. And that 2018 campaign started against Anthony Joshua. He lost by unanimous decision. And then the following fight, he fought Dillian Whyte that same year. Anthony Joshua was in March of 18, Dillian Whyte in July of 18, and both losses to Joseph Parker and both unanimous decision losses at that. Prior to the Anthony Joshua fight, he was steamrolling past opposition and at least putting up really good fights. A classic fight that he had against Andy Ruiz back in 2016. And that's one of the losses that Andy Ruiz has to date on his record. Andy Ruiz, from there, he fought Hughie Fury. He fought Alexander Dimitrenko as well prior to fighting Andy Ruiz. He also shared the ring with Carlos Takam back in 2016. And he's had really good opposition, and he's been on the up and up. So it's crazy to me that people are considering Joseph Parker, to be past his prime and be the older of the two fighters stepping into the ring here, and older by way of career. He's considered to be the one that's going to be basically passing the torch over to Joyce. It's wild to me because he's 30 years old, and yes, he's had a really good heavyweight career. Of course, that big showdown that he had against Junior Fa, that was another interesting matchup that Joseph Parker had. That Junior Fa matchup happened early in 21. Then we had the Chisora back-to-back fights, which were awesome fights, awesome back-and-forth fights between those two. Derek Chisora, of course, that was May of 21, and then December of 21 to close out last year was the long-awaited rematch. So he is definitely the highest ranked, the highest class fighter level, highest level of class fighter that Joyce will be sharing the ring with, or has shared a ring with to date. Yet Joseph Parker sits at age 30. Joyce is 37 years old, and he's considered to be the young gun, technically, by the way that you see these reports happening and so forth. Yet by age, he's older. And people are starting to talk about Joseph Parker being somewhat on the back end of his career. He's not. To me, Joseph Parker's in his prime right now, and he has a really good chance of beating Joyce in this fight. He's got faster hands, faster footwork, better angles. He switches up his angles really well. He's got good pop behind his punches, and he's got a good chin himself. However, I mean, he stood the pressure of Chisora, even though he got shaken up. He stood the punching power of Anthony Joshua. He stood the punching power of Dillian Whyte and managed to finish those fights on his feet. So he hasn't been stopped. Both of those losses were unanimous decision losses. He hasn't been stopped. And Andy Ruiz, another hard-hitting puncher that Joseph Parker shared a ring with, he has a really, really good chance to affect his game plan and definitely pull out a decision win. I don't see him stopping Joyce, but I feel that Joseph Parker could definitely outpoint and outsmart Joyce by way of his footwork, his combinations, and keeping Joyce at bay, fighting from the outside and picking his attacks very well. If he's smart about it, I see Joseph Parker pulling out a decision win over Joyce and throwing a wrench in Joyce's ascension in the heavyweight ranks. This fight is going to be for the WBO Interim Heavyweight Title, meaning they'll be able to punch their ticket and be in line to face off against none other than Oleksandr Usyk, who just retained the titles against Anthony Joshua. That's heavy implications for the heavyweight division. It's one of the funnest divisions, in my opinion. Joyce, on the other hand, we're looking at that 13 knockout out of his 14 victories, coming off of that fight with Christian Hammer. And he is definitely the slower of the two fighters. He's a lot slower at delivering his punches, but when he does hit you, he's got a lot of power behind him. And it's evident by his record, the way that he's been stopping these opponents. It doesn't look like he's hurting the opponents or like there's much pop behind these punches, but he's dropping hammers on them. And that's going to be the difference. If this fight ends by stoppage, I see Joyce being the one to pull this off by stoppage. Parker, I see him winning by decision. I don't see Parker being able to stop Joyce. I see him beating Joyce by decision, and he has to outsmart him. Joyce, on the other hand, may very well drop Parker, and that's where the fight will get very interesting. And then Joyce, I see him, if he wins, he will win by stoppage. The trajectory is there. This proof of work is there. That's how I see the fight playing out. Who do I think is going to win this fight? I have no idea. I'm slightly leaning towards Joyce. And a lot of people are saying that this is a you pick 'em type of fight. And I wouldn't put a strong argument against that. For me, my opinion, I feel that this is a 60-40 fight favoring Joyce. Yes, he's the older of the two fighters. Joseph Parker is the more seasoned of the two fighters by way of records. However, there's a 7-year difference. Joyce, in his ascension in the heavyweight ranks and in the boxing world at a late stage in his life, Parker is still 30 years old. So by age, Joyce is the older one of the two. By boxing resume, Parker is the older of the two fighters. Joyce, in my opinion, I'm leaning towards Joyce pulling this victory out. And I don't have this a 50-50 fight, but fairly close. I have it a 60-40 fight, and I feel that Joyce would be able to get the stoppage over Joseph Parker. If Parker puts on a good performance, and he's known to do so, a good boxing performance, utilizes his hands, utilizes his footwork, he should be able to drag this fight to the later rounds and pull out a decision win, where in the later rounds, Joyce starts slowing down. And even though he keeps coming forward, Parker should be able to pick him apart with combinations, stick and move, and squeeze out a decision victory over Joyce. That's why I have it 60-40. The punching power is the difference maker for me, why I don't have it 50-50, and that being the punching power of Joyce. So very, very interesting card for me. Also, fighting on that same card, decent fighters on there. I mean, we have it looks like Michael Magnesi is going to be fighting Anthony Casacci. Other than that, other fighters that are up and coming fighters, I see the main card that you're going to be looking for should be the co-main, and that would be as notorious, if not more so notorious than Joyce and Joseph Parker, and that being Amanda Serrano fighting Sarah Mahfoud. That's going to be a champ versus a number 3 ranked fighter in Sarah. That's going to be another awesome fight for me, because every time that Amanda Serrano steps into the ring, it's must-watch TV. You want to see a living legend perform. You saw how she performed against Katie Taylor. You see Amanda Serrano, what she means to the boxing world, especially to the female boxing world, and the records that she's broken. Very accomplished, 42-2-1, 30 knockouts to her credit. And she is the real deal, like her nickname suggests. The real deal Amanda Serrano will be performing. And of course, coming off that split decision loss to Katie Taylor, which took place April of this year, here she is in another championship fight, now putting her titles on the line. And all of her featherweight titles will be on the line. IBF, IBO, WBC, WBO, against Sarah Mahfoud. Sarah Mahfoud, of course, if you're not too familiar with her, she is 11-0 to date. 11-0, 3 knockouts to her credit, and out of Denmark. And she's coming off a fresh victory against Nina Menke, who she fought April of this year as well. So they have similar layoffs. It's going to be fun. That co-main event should be a perfect setup for what we'll see in the main event. And I'm excited. I'm surprised that they've been reporting that the show almost got canceled because of lack of sales. I'm really surprised, because this is a very interesting card, and the fact that they added Amanda Serrano just a few weeks ago, because I wasn't aware that she was going to be on this card until maybe a week or 2 weeks back, that I noticed that she was saying, she posted something on Twitter or maybe Instagram where she said she was traveling, heading overseas to the UK, and I was like, why is she heading over to the UK? And I started doing a little research. I noticed that she was going to be added to this card, and that should have brought some more attention to this card. Surprised that's what's happening right now. Nonetheless, it'll be an interesting fight, and I'm happy that it's going on, that they're pulling through with this. And I'm really interested to see how the landscape in the heavyweight division continues to take part and to develop. Reports are right now that Anthony Joshua, coming off that loss to Oleksandr Usyk, that he's already in talks, and I believe there is an agreement that's been reached between him and Tyson Fury for a mega fight, a UK mega fight, this coming December. For Oleksandr Usyk, he says that he's got 3 fights that he's looking at making happen, and one of those fights that he's planning on executing on or effecting on will be Tyson Fury and Canelo Alvarez. Those are fights that he's interested in taking on. So again, those would be awesome fights to see, these catchweight super fights. But the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight should be huge if in fact this agreement does get finalized. It looks like they reached an agreement. Now it's just a matter of contracts and money and all that good stuff that always comes into play. And the reason why so many big fights have fallen apart as well, where they just can't make it happen when the time comes. So that's the report in the heavyweight division. Of course, recently we just had Andy Ruiz beat King Kong. Deontay Wilder will be stepping in against Robert Helenius come October. And Joshua unable to regain his titles against Usyk. So Usyk sits atop, Tyson Fury sits atop, and this one has title implications. Joyce and Joseph Parker. That's another one that continues to develop the landscape there in the heavyweight division. And then there's also talks about Dillian Whyte and Daniel Dubois. I think those talks ended up stalling, but that would be another big fight because Daniel Dubois just picked up a version of the WBA championship, the one that Brian was holding on to, Don King's heavyweight. He had that version of the WBA title, the claim to the WBA, unifying the WBA title against Oleksandr Usyk. Daniel Dubois lifted that title from him and stopped him. And now that fight with him and Dillian Whyte would be another big fight for this division as it continues to develop. So interesting things happening in the heavyweight division. Tune into this one. I'm interested to see how you think if the 60-40 leaning towards Joyce is pretty accurate, or if you have it more of a 50-50, or if you think that Joseph Parker's just going to wipe the floor, outbox, and possibly stop Joyce and throw a big wrench in his ascension in the heavyweight ranks. Interested to hear from you guys. Don't forget to leave comments. Follow me on Instagram, guys. Follow me on Instagram. That's the main forum and the main venue that I'm using there to push out the podcast. Thank you guys for the love, for the support, for continuing to spread the word to your loved ones, to your friends, to your coworkers about the show as it continues to grow. And I'll continue to bring more episodes your way. Have a good one, guys. Take care of yourselves. Salud.